Chapter 3 Rentals. Real estate is the best investment for small savings. More money is made from the rise in real estate values than from all other causes combined. William Jennings Bryan. A matter of perspective. As you move up the wealth elevator, you gain a larger perspective. Many of us were brought up in families with frugal habits and no concept of financial freedom. In 2008, I was just halfway through saving up for the down payment on my first house. One day, a bunch of guys I supervised on my construction crew admired a picture of a Ford F-150 Raptor truck, referring to it as one badass SOB. I immediately wanted one. Then I checked the price tag. Ooh, who buys a truck that costs 1.5 times an entire year's salary after income taxes? I asked myself. That's crazy. Of course, we all know people who use consumer debt to do just that. In 2007, when I was in my first few months of corporate management training, another management trainee spent his signing bonus on a top-tier BMW 3 Series with a $55,000 price tag. Meanwhile, I drove a 2003 Volkswagen Jetta that cost less than $12,000. After I got into rental properties and hit floor one, my entire outlook changed. That down payment I had scraped and saved for to buy my first rental seemed like peanuts. By the time I owned 11 rental properties, a $100,000 car was no longer out of reach. But I didn't buy it yet. Instead, I chose to take that money and buy more real estate. The investor's journey. Rentals are the most conventional entry point for investors, making them the primary investment vehicle on floor one of the wealth elevator. Although few people keep rentals in their portfolios as they progress up to floor two, direct ownership in rental houses is a great way to get your foot in the door and start building equity. I had my aha moment about rentals very soon after buying my first one. Wow, I thought, I'm making really good returns, and I'm making money 4 ways. The 4 ways to make money on rental properties follow. Number 1, equity buildup. My tenants were paying down my mortgage as the equity grew. Number 2, property appreciation. The property was gaining in value every year. Number 3, tax benefits. I could write off property expenses and depreciation from taxable income. And number 4, cash flow. I obtained monthly cash flow after expenses. Seeing that, I thought, if I can stack these things on top of each other, I'll be able to quit my day job in no time. That was my naive end goal at the time. And rental property investments were getting me there much quicker than the traditional investments my peers were doing. To make rentals work for you, it's important to assess whether you're ready for the rental game. Learn the upsides and downsides of rentals and figure out what style of rental investment is right for you. That starts with understanding just what you're diving into. Rentals are a real commitment. As I saw the benefits of rental investing, I shared my success story with everybody. Friends I went to college with, family members, even coworkers. I was shocked at how few of them were willing to take even one step down the fast lane towards their financial freedom. Rentals are a hands-on process. Even if you're buying a so-called turnkey rental from one of the many vendors out there, you have to get off your butt and do a minimal amount of work. Most passive investors who own less than 10 units are able to manage that portfolio with a few hours a week in the evenings or during some of their breaks at work. With rentals, you'll want to vet a property manager and build a relationship over the phone, access an area you might never have lived in to know if it's a good investment, while being selective about your broker's opinion because they just want you to buy the property. Be willing to absorb setbacks, which can be costly between $5,000 to $20,000 if you pick the wrong tenant. Then readjust if you can on the next acquisition. I've got a video on my YouTube channel where we had a bad tenant. They trashed my property. You can imagine. If you can't, check out the YouTube channel. Build the rest of your vendor team with a broker, contractors, lawyer, accountant, and title company. It's a lot of moving pieces. And when it's new to you and the vendors know it, it's 10 times as hard. The fact is, not everybody is the right fit for rentals. It takes a certain character and a good deal business aptitude that not a lot of college graduates have. It's not hard work, but it can be a lot of work. If this feels overwhelming or you already make multiple 6 figures at your day job, Don't worry, you can bypass this floor and move to syndicated deals on floor 2 via the wealth elevator. Stack investments. If you're on floor 1, visit thewealthelevator.com/returns and watch the whiteboard exercise I did there to learn more about stacking investments, or take our free remote investing e-course for people wanting to buy their first rental property. You can access this at thewealthelevator.com/turnkey. And if you sign up for our list, you can also get access to our in-depth remote rental e-course in our members portal. Upsides and downsides of rental properties. Let's start with the upsides. The advantages of rentals are the reason why we invest in real estate as our primary investment asset class. Rental investments have a tax advantage component, and they're a great way to get your hands wet in real estate property while getting familiar with the market. If you purchase in geographic markets with the right rent to value ratios, you'll have passive cash flow. The real estate market can go up and down, but if you're positively cash flowing, you can wait out the lows and keep making profits. If you're an investor who wants to play the rehab game, fixing up houses and then reselling them, you can inject value into your own assets and sell or refinance for big paydays. And you can build relationships with your tenants, seeing the value you're adding to a community firsthand. You'll also enjoy a bit of ego boost, seeing your name on the title of that asset. It belongs to you, no one else. That can bring a lot of pride. That said, if you don't want your tenants to know who you are, and you could care less who owns the property, as long as it's a good investment, perhaps you are more wired to be a passive limited partner in syndications, which I explain in the next 2 chapters. How to calculate the value of rentals. How do you determine the value of your rentals? By checking a simple number called the rent-to-value ratio. If the number is 1% or more, it's a healthy rental investment. If the number is lower than 1%, you are more likely to have negative cash flow when all the expenses are counted. It's not always the case, but this gives you an easy way to evaluate a property before you buy. How do you calculate the rent-to-value ratio? You simply divide the monthly rent by purchase price. Let's say you buy a place for $400,000 and it rents for $2,000 a month. You plug in the numbers to find that $2,000 divided by $400,000 is 0.5%. That's way less than 1%, and the deal is not going to work. But suppose you buy a place for $400,000 and it rents at a $4,000 a month. The rent-to-value ratio is $4,000 divided by $400,000, or 1%. You're in. You can download a GIF resource calculator at thewealthelevator.com/analyzer. The downsides of rentals can be significant. First, you have to spend money to make money in rental investing. You have to hire a property management company or spend your time operating the rental. Tenants are also a large variable that impacts how much you have to spend. Some of them cause a lot of damage to your property. That amount often is uncollectible due to their credit profile, unless you want to throw good money at bad money and sue someone with nothing to collect. After I maxed out my rental properties, I experienced the downsides of being on this floor for the long term. As I mentioned, federally insured loans max out at 10 properties per spouse. With 11 rental properties, I had an eviction or 2 every year. I missed out on a ton of back rent, and these tenants often trashed the property. Once my tenants even filled a toilet with concrete and the living room floor with about 50 dog poops. Gross. Sometimes, when you're looking at a $20,000 repair bill, you lose all faith in humanity, not to mention go crazy when you do the calculations in your head and realize the profits for 6 properties were just blown by one bad tenant moving out. Even with good tenants, catastrophes happen. A tree falls on the house, a storm floods the basement, you name it. You could eat your entire cash flow for the year. But again, it's those 5-figure damages that makes you wonder if it was all worth it. The major downside, especially for affluent investors, is that the debt you take on for these properties, the mortgage, is in your personal name. Remember that pride of ownership with your name on the title? It also helps the plaintiff's lawyer who wants to sue you because you have direct personal liability. Even if you set up an LLC for asset protection, you are the direct owner and managing member. The truth behind rental properties. Rental properties are easy to get into, but you still need to jump over this bar, the down payment. You can't start investing in real estate until you're out of the basement and you have some money in your pocket. You need $25,000 to $40,000 to buy a decent $100,000 to $150,000 property and have cash reserves in case a mishap happens. The best rental properties. The majority of the American population lives in rentals that rent from $700 to $1,300 a month. These lower middle class workforce properties make for great investments. A general trend of bifurcation between the wealthy and the poor exists, with the shrinking middle class being brought downward. Even in bad times such as recessions, these properties perform well as more people look for value housing options. When a lot of people get into real estate, they think of buying a rental that they would want to live in or a high-end property. That is the exact opposite of what you should be doing. You are not your target renter. That's actually basically what I did on my first rental property in Seattle. It was a higher end home that I obviously lived in for a little bit, and it just didn't produce that rent to value ratio that needed to cash flow, which is ultimately why I moved to more secondary markets like Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis, and started to buying rental properties there. Why single family homes? 3 and 4 bedroom houses that have 2 baths and it generally run 1,400 square feet to 2,000 square feet are your sweet spot. The exit plan is great too, since a retail buyer looking for a home to live in makes for an easier sale, as opposed to a multi-unit, which will typically go to an unemotional investor. In other words, stick to single-family homes rather than chasing better rent-to-value ratios with 2 or 4 unit properties. I made the transition from floor 1 rentals to floor 2 syndications as soon as I learned how more affluent investors tended to dump their starter investment rentals. By then, I had already amassed 11 rental properties, which were difficult to sell since I had so many. You also need to consider your market. Markets are divided in 3 categories: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Primary markets are generally found in popular states such as California, New York, and Hawaii. Basically, the sexy and cool places to live. Secondary markets are generally found in blue-collar areas like Georgia, Indiana, Texas, and Florida, while tertiary markets are in more out-of-the-way locales with smaller populations, still over 200,000 people, like Huntsville, Alabama. Markets are usually citywide, but can sometimes be generalized to the state. As you saw above, Dallas and Houston are both secondary markets, for instance, while Waco, Texas is a tertiary market. Generally, I like to invest in red states. Political affiliations aside, I want to have good landlord laws on my side. Also, red states are typically pro-economy, which is key to increasing blue-collar populations. Neighborhood classes. Neighborhoods have grades: Class A, B, C, D, and F. Sorry for the rather coarse analogy, reason being, I've got a daughter and this is the way I think. But imagine if your adult daughter went out for a leisurely run in these neighborhoods. Class A, she wouldn't think twice about her safety, even at night. In Class B, she'd happily go out for a run during the day, but won't venture out at night. In Class C, she isn't jogging. People in those neighborhoods don't have the leisure time to go out for a run. But even if they did, it isn't safe, day or night. In Class F, we also call these war zone type of areas, she'd be driving through the red lights as long as no cops are around just to get the hell out of there. I left Class D for last because it's a bit of a trick. When realtors are marketing an awful place, they don't want to call it Class F. They call it Class D or Class C instead. Be careful taking the advice of brokers, real estate agents, realtors, mortgage brokers, and lenders. They all get paid when you transact. They're not partners. They have no skin in the game. Some other books out there will say these people are part of your team. They are not part of your team. And this is what's cool about syndications, where you have aligned interests with the deal operators there. But back to doing it yourself with rental properties. After the deal, these vendors, we'll call them that, are typically nowhere to be found unless they think you'll buy another property from them. Your landlord days with them are numbered too, because you're moving up to floor 2 as quickly as possible, where you can benefit from better alignment structures within a syndication. What kind of investor are you? The funny thing is that real estate is such a great investment vehicle that you can have a really bad strategy And even if the numbers don't make sense, in 30 years, you'll have it paid off. Doing that, you'll be a lot further ahead than many of your affluent friends. But you can do better, which is why you're reading this book. You want to meet your financial goals in a fraction of the time other retirees accomplish it. You want to blow past them. After thousands of investor consults, I start to see a pattern on how investors mature on this first floor. I break down investors on the first floor into 4 levels. Number 1, mom and pop landlord. Number 2, aware of the numbers investor. Number 3, aware of the goal remote investor. Number 4, sophisticated and scaling investor. If you own rentals, this might help you see where you stand on the scale or where you might strive to go. If not, you can gain an overview. First one, mom and pop landlord. At this stage, you're a very unsophisticated landlord. The vast majority of investors are at this level. These investors buy property and think they're cash flowing because the tenant's paying down their mortgage. The truth is, they fail to account for expenses, including the property management company or their own time, maintenance, repairs, and even monthly PITI, which is your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance costs. Sure, they make money, but nowhere near as much as they could. We also see a lot of this with our investors' parents. The older generation owns property within driving distance of where they live, typically in California, and they don't employ a professional property manager. After all, this is the only way to make the numbers work in a poor rent-to-value location. My landlord in college did this, and I can remember him driving to our place on a Saturday night to unclog our filthy toilet with his poor wife waited in the Mercedes. The next level, aware of the numbers investor. As you get a little more sophisticated, you include all your expenses in your return on investment calculation. To be conservative, you want to assume that 50% of your income goes to these miscellaneous expenses, and then you pay for your debt service, your mortgage. To calculate it yourself, download our free property analyzer at thewealthelevator.com/analyzer. At this stage, you still might do a lot of the managing yourself. Your cash flow may be covering your expenses, but it doesn't take into account your time and sweat. You're probably trapped in your own home location, which might not be a good market, i.e. a blue state with poor rent-to-value ratios. Basically, if you have rental properties in California, Washington, Hawaii, and you might be taking your profits to pay down your mortgage. Yikes! Hint, paying down your debt will lower your return on equity and is not what sophisticated investors do. We'll discuss this more in detail later. At this stage, know that it's common to see floor 1 investors with loan-to-value ratios of less than 50 to 60%. The return on equity is good for the first 5 to 10 years of ownership, but the long ownership time is a cardinal sin for investors who are mindful of optimizing returns. The third level is the aware of the goal remote investor. At this stage, you are able to underwrite your income and cash flow statement and understand optimizing for return on equity. See graph at thewealthelevator.com/ROE. The major mind shift here is a realization that you need to invest outside your geographic area to position your holdings in the best emerging markets and to diversify over multiple markets. Despite the comfort zone in your own home area or primary market, more than likely, other emerging, and these are getting into the secondary and tertiary markets, have less competition, which makes for better pricing and cash flow margins. By going outside your local area, you have also learned how to manage your property manager without having to be geographically close. You're consciously walking the razor's edge of good debt, equity growth, and cash flow to safely optimize for equity growth. And the last level, sophisticated and scaling investor. One way to achieve scalability and diversify into multiple non-local remote locations is to invest in turnkey rentals. These properties are fixed up with tenant-grade finishes, and sometimes you can even buy them with a tenant already on the lease. The downside of these properties is that the flipper who provides the product needs to make money, so you pay a premium for the property. I've seen a lot of top turnkey companies charge $10,000 to $25,000 over comparables, all for the advantage of convenience. If you're in the turnkey property game for more than a couple of years, you start to realize why these flippers don't manage the property themselves, because it's a pain in the butt. The truth is, there's nothing turnkey about turnkey. That's why we call it semi-passive. It's just not scalable past 10 to 20 properties. Eventually, you want to grow in your skills of using other people's talents. This transitions into leaving the do-it-yourself landlord world and stepping into the truly passive investor world, a realm of different vendor and investor circles. In other words, a lot of the effort you make dealing with insurance companies, turnkey providers, property managers, and even non-accredited and some accredited investors will not carry over when you go into syndications on floor 2. Given these downsides, why did I buy rentals? And why doesn't everybody just skip owning rentals? To skip this step, you need to be qualified through net worth or income to ride the wealth elevator from floor 1 to floor 2. Get educated on rentals. In the past, my platform provided education to students on the acquisition of remote rental properties, guiding them through a simple step-by-step process. You can still access this valuable resource through an e-course for free by signing up at thewealthelevator.com/turnkey. In the real estate industry, I always dislike the abundance of expensive educational programs that charge anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000. To address this issue, I created a free e-course as an alternative, making it accessible to investors who are in the early stages, between the basement floor or the first floor, and who should not be spending that money on education, but instead using it on a down payment on the properties they buy. Build your investment plan. If your net worth is less than $1 million, quite frankly, you need more alternative investments and fewer traditional investments. Why? Because alternative investments, number one, give you better returns than the retail traditional investments out there. And number two, typically give you passive income and deductions to allow you to pay less taxes in the long run. Simple. Here's where you start. Floor 1. You're not yet an accredited investor, at least $200,000 a year in income or $1 million net worth. You need to increase your alternative assets or increase your income at your day job to get to floor 2 as soon as possible. Since you don't have the income or net worth or firepower of those skipping right to floor 2 and above, you might have to invest more aggressively and go heavier into more alternative investment portfolio. This is what I personally did. From 2009 to 2015, I was buying rentals up to 90% of my net worth. You should have more than 60% of your holdings in alternative investments if you're still on floor 1 or less. Passive Investor Plan 1. At this stage, you have few or no deals. Start by slowly moving up from 0% of your net worth in alternative investments to at least 20% for starters. Once you invest in deals, start implementing basic tax strategies as captured in the tax chapters, chapters 7 and 8. Legal. You have insurance covering your car and home as well as umbrella insurance for investing. If you're under $1 million net worth, you're probably not a target of lawsuits. Of course, lawyers will likely disagree with this mindset. Legal entities have costs, but give you peace of mind. So you may choose to invest in a LLC. Note that when you're investing in direct ownership of rentals, the level of liability potential is much higher than being a passive LP. More on that in floor 2. Retirement. To get tax savings today, don't invest cash in qualified retirement plans. Yeah, I'm talking about your 401k or your IRA. Depending on where your net worth is, you will likely opt to prematurely draw out your retirement money, or at the very least stop contributing any more to these plans except to capture any company match. Home equity. Do not buy your own home. Use that equity to invest. One rule of thumb I have is to not buy a home until your net worth is 2 to 3 times greater that of your home. Homes are an okay investment, but will not grow your wealth as much as alternative investments. With that plan in place, you're ready to start moving on your investment journey. Over the course of this chapter, you've probably noticed a theme. Always try to steer away from the pack. Not a lot of people buy rental properties, but those that do will typically buy in their geographical backyard. So how do we get away from those guys? One solution is to go out of state with a turnkey rental, but you've seen the downsides of that. If you really want to separate from the pack, the answer is simple: syndicated deals. And that's the topic of the next two chapters. Now, to close out this chapter here on rental properties, this is my story and how I progressed through the first floor. And now we're going to get into the second floor with syndications. But people don't realize that it took me a long time to get my net worth to $100,000, then $500,000, going through this rental property ownership stage, or what I've referred to as like the adolescent stage. And if you've went through puberty like I did, you know that's not fun, just like owning rental properties, but it is necessary. I bought my first few rental properties in Seattle, which was a primary market, which you don't have very good rent to value ratios. And I progressed through those four phases that I mentioned in the last chapter and started to buy rental properties in the secondary markets such as Atlanta, Birmingham, and Indianapolis. And I had 11 rentals by 2015. So again, just if you're looking for a timeline, 2009, I bought that first rental. And over the next 6 years, I went over double digits in terms of rental properties. But as you're going to see the story unfold, transitioning away from those rental properties as they started to realize higher net worth accredited investors did something a little bit different. The last thing to note, I think a lot of you guys who may be picking up this book already an accredited investor, $1 million net worth or greater, will likely skip over this rental property ownership section. That said, we've always made it a point through this book of creating a legacy for the next generation. I definitely can say that it really helped me to become an operator of these real estate assets and become a better investor, understanding things from the ground level. Now, I'm not saying that it's necessary for a passive investor, but what I'm saying, if you're looking to get your adult kids involved in this type of stuff and you're willing to spend a little time with them, it would be cool for them to own a little rental property to just get the hang of it. These are the kind of the crazy ideas that come up in our retreats where a guy mentioned that he created a fake rental property for their kid who was actually pretty young. I believe they must have been 12 or 15 years old. But they created this fake rental property and they just made stuff up that happened. Hey, daughter, the refrigerator broke. What do you want to do? You want to buy another one? If not, we need $400. Like have them face those types of decisions and uncertainties and then have these steps going backwards. I think this is unfortunately what our next generation is not going to have to go through, which is a valuable part of the learning process, but also having the gratitude of when you are able to write $250,000, $100,000 checks to invest in this or that you understand, the meaning of that money and what it took at one point in this wealth building journey. But just something to think about, and we'll see you in the next chapter.